Hello and welcome to another episode of Butler's Babble, where we aim to empower, motivate, and inspire you to live your best life. And today we have Samantha with us today, and she's going to come on. She's going to talk about how she had to deal with neglect, bullying, abuse, and how she also had to battle with addiction and confront a lot of betrayal. And but she's made her way through it. She's loving life now, and she's living it to the fullest. And we're going to bring Samantha on and tell us her story. So Samantha, welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you. And I apologize. We were supposed to record this like 2 weeks ago, and I had to cancel on Samantha last second there. And she was gracious enough to come back on. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but my daughter ended up giving birth to her baby boy, so she kind of understood that I had to like cancel the show at that date. So thank you for at least being patient with me and finding another date to get you in here.
No problem. And thank you for the opportunity to let me share my story.
Definitely. So why don't you start by letting people know who you are, where you're from, things like that. Just give us a little background on Samantha.
Well, my name is Samantha Buttle. I'm born and raised in Ottawa Valley. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in cottage country. When people ask me about my childhood and how I grew up, because I've experienced so much trauma in my life, my brain automatically goes to the negative, all the bad things that have happened to me. So I have had to consciously choose to go back and remember the positive things in my life that have happened. So when I grew up, I remember beautiful moments with the family, the aunts, the cousins, and uncles, all at my grandparents' house on the Queen's Line, picking apples and making apple pies and running around outside when our parents are sitting at the table after dinner and all the kids are outside playing kick the can.
No, exactly. And for people that don't know, Haley Station, where you're from, it's basically just land. There's not a lot going on there. It's a
There isn't very much.
so it's more like farmland and people like that. And so as a child, though, I guess that gives you a lot of open space to just go out and play. And
It was a child's wonderland. We were able to go out the front door and just run and just run. It's just woods. There's nothing you can get into besides hay bales.
exactly, because your neighbors were probably quite distance away from you,
About a kilometer.
about a kilometer. Yeah. And growing up in Haley Station, I guess a lot of the stuff that you went through happened at a very young age, I guess.
It started from, I'm going to say about 6, from what I can recall. I was bullied at home. I was bullied at school. I was never safe. Um, my brother was really mean to me. He insulted me, called me every single horrible name in the book. And when you hear negative things about yourself at such a young age, you begin to believe it. And then when I went to school, I had a really hard time learning. I was not able to comprehend any of the material. I remember being in grade 5 and my teacher asked me to read a paragraph in one of the textbooks and I couldn't do it. I was embarrassed. And that's traumatizing for a child on itself.
No, definitely. I mean, I was always traumatized when I had to get up and do a speech in front of the class, but yeah, I could see like he asked you to read a paragraph and you can't do it. Now, was this right in front of the whole class, or was
Oh,
this?
yeah, in front of the whole class.
So that's very
And because
traumatizing.
I've experienced so much trauma at such a young age, I was in fight or flight mode, always. So I was never able to sit there and retain any information. And I was never good at school. I was always probably 50 student, just barely getting by.
And did you find that because I find sometimes when people are struggling like that, that's when they act out a bit more at that age, only because not because they're bad people or bad kids or anything like that. It's more because they're struggling, and it's a way of them to sort of almost ask for help, but without asking.
Right. I find I was a loose cannon. I was angry. I was miserable. I was sad. I wasn't, all I remember of myself is being impulsive, mean. I was not a nice person.
Hmm. And because I know one of my daughters, sometimes academically, she was more of the hands-on, sure how to do something, and she could do it no problem. But when it came to the trying to read stuff and retain it in her system, similar to like you, I'm sure, it didn't come as easy for her as it did other kids, and that's got to be frustrating.
I think everybody learns differently. I know my middle son, he went through a lot of trauma whenever he was younger between me and my ex-husband, and unfortunately my children were exposed to a lot of toxic behavior, and I find being exposed to that toxic environment put puts the children in a place where they're in fight or flight mode, so they're not able to be relaxed and be present and learn any of the information. So I find with my son, now that he's in a healthy home, I'm able to teach him in a way that I never had. So before, when when my family came out of the fight or flight mode and the toxic living environment into a healthy, stable environment, I was able to understand where he's coming from because I had been there, and I knew how to teach him because I had to relearn these things and how to teach myself. So in the beginning, when he was in grade 4, he was behind in school completely. He was in a grade 1, 2, 3, 4 class. And because I've been where I've been, I was able to show up for him in a way that I never had. And only this year he is in an actual grade 5 with no IEP, the individual learning plan, which is huge for a child who has gone through what he has gone through.
And if I'm not mistaken, like, and we'll get into your book later because you did write a book and that I've been reading it. With everything that was going on at home and at school and that, sometimes you felt you had that one place that you could go to that just threw the whole world away for a while, which I believe was to do with your bedroom and some headphones.
It was. I remember my only safe place that I found was in my bedroom, and it was the Backstreet Boys. My love, if there's one famous person in this world, sorry, 5 famous people in this world that I would want to meet, it is the Backstreet Boys. They saved me growing up. That's all I had was my big boombox in my room with my headphones and the Backstreet Boys.
No, and that's the thing, like the power of music, because I grew up as a musician myself, and people don't realize how big music is in their life because you can be in the car driving, you can hear a song, you can be walking somewhere or watching a TV show and a song comes on and it puts you back into a place that you remember hearing that song when you were a kid or whatever.
It
And
does.
and sometimes it does give you that peace when you're having a lot of that trauma going on to you, to have something like that that you can go back to at least with a good memory and say, you know what, at least when I was in my room, I had my headphones on, just listening to the Backstreet Boys. I was in another place and I was happy. And it was just, that was my place.
It was my place. And I don't think these musicians truly understand how many people they help with just their music. It may seem like it's simple to them, but really it's so much bigger than them.
No, I totally agree with you. And I'm glad you at least had that because everybody needs that little place where they can feel safe.
They
And
do.
if you're not feeling safe normally at home, like which is a place you should feel safe, at least you had somewhere in the home you could go that you can feel safe in that. So going back to there, then you're going through all this bullying. Was bullying happening at school also, or was it just a little bit
Yes.
at home?
it was happening at school as well. I was always the outcast. I only had I'm not sure why to this day why it is that I was only able to have one friend at a time. I wasn't the person to be able to have more than one friend. Maybe it was a loyalty thing, which I got from my father, the importance of loyalty. Um, I was just an outcast. I was never accepted, and I always looked at other girls and almost felt resentment towards them because they had, the I guess, brand name clothes, and they seemed like they had a happy home to go to. But then again, you only look at what you think you don't have, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also when you're looking at them, they're probably looking at you in a similar way too, because a lot of times I find well, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And I'm
You don't.
sure a lot of those people at your school did not know what was going on with you, because you probably put on a front or something to show people that
Definitely
um
don't think they ever did. And truly, people have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. And I try to teach my kids this. Everyone has their own issues, is fighting their own battles that you know absolutely nothing about. And when somebody comes to school and they're in a bad mood or they're acting out, you have no idea what they're going through. And the smallest act of kindness can make the biggest difference that you have no idea.
Yeah, I remember when I was working at a fitness store back in the 90s, I was always known as the happy-go-lucky guy, the one who always smiles and everything like that. And I remember one of the coworkers there, I'd been working there for a couple of years, and she came up to me and she's like, um, "You weren't in a good mood yesterday, were you?" I'm like, "Why? What makes you say that?" She's like, "You weren't yourself yesterday. You were quiet. You were snapping at people when they asked you to do something. You kind of had this little snap back and that." And I'm like, "Well, I was kind of in a not the greatest moods and that, but I didn't know it showed." And she goes, "Oh no, I could definitely tell. Not everybody could, but some of them just thought I was being probably an idiot. But she could tell right away that I was just off a little bit. So, I know what it's like just to try and put that little mask on all the time."
It's it's not something. It's hard to live like that. And I've learned um through experience. I can't. That's not who I am. I can't walk around with a mask on. It's not me. I'm have to be authentic and respect myself and who I am and what I've gone through and how far I've come. So if I'm having a bad day or a good day, I show it, and I that feels genuine to me. And showing up in any other way in this world, I just can't do it.
No, exactly. And you got to be yourself, and people should let you be yourself. And unfortunately, with the situation you were growing up in, it was hard to be yourself. So at one point,
It
then,
was.
yeah, and at one point, you actually were sent out west for a while.
I was. So I was taught when I was growing up to hide my emotions and shove all of my emotions down. And I didn't know how to deal with my emotions and what I was going through and how to process anything. So a lifetime of shoving everything down, it piles on. It just keeps piling on until you're just a volcano ready to erupt. And I was a walking time bomb constantly. The smallest little thing that anybody did to me, a stranger, and I just explode. And just learning how to regulate your emotions and to process your feelings and become aware of what it is that you're going through and understand to accept yourself is really hard to do.
Definitely.
And every behavior that I was taught growing up, I had to unlearn everything that I learned. And it took me the longest time to do. And it's not something that happens in a year or 2 years. There's no time frame on this healing journey. It's constant every day. I'm still going through it.
Yep.
And it's not easy to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, I am not a good person for doing that. But it's something that I've had to do, that it's made me a better person. And I have learned the hard way. You can't go around it. You have to go through it. As uncomfortable, as painful as it is, the only way is through it.
Yeah. And did you find going out west like that helped you through some of that? Did it open you up a little bit more?
I find when my parents sent me to live with my uncle for and his wife for a month when I was younger, it was one of the most cherished memories of my childhood. That is the one of the only men that ever respected me was my uncle, and he has given me a whole new appreciation for police officers. He's the only hope that I ever had, because I've never been treated with any kind of respect from a man. Only the love that him and his family showed me, the safety that he showed me was I'll I'm forever grateful.
No, exactly. And sometimes it does
And I
take that
hope
one
that
person like that.
it really does.
Yeah, because we had a guest on, my friend Rob Provenche. He's a photographer in Ontario here, and he was an alcoholic growing up, and he actually went out west too. He was sent to live with his, I think, his uncle who needed somebody to help him with driving and stuff down there. And he said that was one thing that actually got him back on track too, was living over there with his uncle. It was that one person that basically made him feel like he can do whatever he wanted to do and he can kick this thing. So sometimes it just takes that little step from one person to just give you that gratitude or just to give you that kindness to say, listen, I'm here. I'm going to
It's
help you out. Let's get through it.
I think it was that little bit of peace for that short amount of time gave me the hope to hang on and to keep going. And if I was able to experience this short time frame of peace in my life, well, maybe I'll have it again someday up the road. And I almost use it as a way to escape my reality, to maintain hope in life. When things were really bad, I would go and sit in my room and listen to the Backstreet Boys and reminisce about the beautiful days in the mountains.
And so, how old would have you been roughly when you were sent out to BC?
The first time I think I was probably about 11 or 12. I was definitely young.
Now, when you came back home, I guess you went back to school, a lot of the same kids in the area.
It was the same. It was like when I went to the airport, when my parents dropped me off at the airport, I a weight from my shoulders was lifted, and I just left all my troubles and worries behind. But the moment I came back, it was like I just picked right up where I left off. Because again, I was never given the tools to process any of my emotions. It was the only way was to escape reality, run away from your problems, not deal with them.
Exactly. Now, when you came back like that, going to school, now the problems are starting up again. Did that experience away for a month help you navigate through a different way now?
No, it never did, because I was never given the tools to heal, to process, or a safe place to be a child. And with all that unhealed trauma, and my outbursts and my anger, and it just got worse. And my troubles from my childhood continued on into my adolescence and my young adulthood, where I made a lot of horrible decisions. I never valued myself. I never had a healthy relationship. I had zero respect for myself. I never had any idea what self love was.
And going through, say, high school now, because around that time when you're coming back from out west, you're going like grades between grade 7, grade 8, that kind of idea, getting into junior high, now coming into high school. How did it affect you through high school life? Did things change anything for you in high school life? Did it get even worse? Did you start getting into other stuff going through high school? Like, how did your high school life start getting into a factor?
High school, you know what? It was all kind of a blur. I was bullied in high school. Um, I just I don't have positive memories of it. I started smoking when I was in grade 9. I smoked cigarettes for 20 years. I would run away from home with boys. My parents would drop us off, my brother and I, at the ski hill to go skiing every weekend. And I would meet boys and have kissing competitions. Just,
I shouldn't
I,
laugh, but it's just the way you said it is.
it just, the way I'm not proud of it, but I didn't know any better. I was never taught. And it was as though I was using these forms uh, to self-soothe, and they were so unhealthy. It was a coping mechanism. It was so unhealthy. And the older I got, these coping mechanisms became more and more toxic and unhealthy. And then to the point where the trauma kept piling up, and then the coping mechanisms just got next level. I turned to alcohol. I remember when I was in my early 20s, you know, when you go through a spurt of you have a really hard time and you haven't had a drink and you just want to go out and let loose and maybe have one or two drinks just to let loose and have a good time. I would go to the liquor store and purchase a 40 of vodka and just drink the entire bottle in one sitting because I had no idea what limits I had. I had no limits. I had no boundaries for myself. And it was a way of, it made me feel better. It numbed out all of my pain. It was an escape for me.
Yeah. And it's similar to like when people who are addicted to stuff like cocaine and that, when you think about it, they always say they take it the first time, they get that high, and then when they come back to normal, like, okay, I can control this, I can do it every now and they take it again, and then they take it again. And eventually your high is not as high as it used to be. And when you come down, you go lower than what normal was. And then you take it again and it goes not as high as before, but it's still a bit of a high, and then it comes down lower to the point where when you come off of it, you're so low that you need to actually take it again just to get yourself back to normal again.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that same kind of addiction when it comes to alcohol, or just you coping with trauma. You were doing what you were doing to cope with it. And when that wasn't working anymore, because you were coming back down and going even lower, you needed to change. Now alcohol came into it and that made you get that high again. So I can understand where you're coming from. Now, during this whole high school days where you're going through all this, did you actually have anybody that you considered a friend, somebody from school that you could hang out with that you trusted, at least one person? Or was it just more of, I'm just going to hang out with whoever wants to be around me and I'm just going to do what I'm going to do?
No, I had one really good close friend in high school. I was, I don't, I wasn't able to have more than one friend at a time. It was in public school, I had one best friend, and then in high school, we separated, and it's almost like I abandoned her to become best friends with another girl. And then that's the way it continued throughout my life. I've never been able to have more than one group of friends or one more than one person
One
at a
close friend
time.
that you can confide in and
Yeah.
stuff.
So, and that's something that I've had to unlearn and teach myself how to do.
Because it sounds to me, and I don't mean this in a negative, like trying to say negative to you or anything, but you were almost like the one I would tell my daughter, that's the one you want to stay away from. That's the bad
Yes.
influence. And I'm not trying to say that to be
Yes.
mean or anything, but just listening
No,
to your
that's
story,
100%.
that sounds like the type person. It's like, as a father, I'm like, you know what? See those people, those are the ones you want to stay away from.
Those are the ones you want to stay away from. And I tell my kids today, once upon a time, that was me. I think you should probably steer clear of that girl.
Exactly, because you know from experience, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. I didn't want it to be putting you down, because none of us can put anybody down. We all did stuff when we were younger that we regret nowadays. You took it maybe to a more extreme, but I can understand why, because you were going through stuff that people didn't know, but in the background, what you were going through, and you were just trying to survive. Basically, you were in survival mode. That
That's all I ever did.
yeah,
I feel like my whole life up until 4, 5 years ago, I was in survival mode.
and did you find
And it's
did it make things worse by doing that?
survival mode. It's where I am today. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. It's a horrible way to live. It's not a way to live at all. It's, you're almost numb. You're not present. I never knew how to be present. It was day to day, just getting by and not being able to experience the beautiful moments in life that you would have with your kids, like walking your kids to school and just being present and doing homework with your kids and enjoying the little things. I couldn't do it.
It's true. That's very true. Now, did you now you have three children of your own. Did you
I do.
um that did you have your children after high school, or were you one of the ones that had one during high school? And I'm not trying to say anything mean. I'm just trying to put it all together.
Oh no, I had one of my children in my early 20s, my first son, my first true love. He Unfortunately, he got to experience me at my absolute worst, and he's seen me at my worst and at my best. I had him from a unconventional relationship, a sugar daddy relationship, which I'm not proud of. um he
He's the love of
and
your
then
life,
after
basically.
so he sorry
He's the love of your life.
he's I will never forget the first time I saw each of my children when they were born. It was the most memorable moment, and I think every mother can
Yeah,
relate to that.
definitely.
So I had Austin with in my early 20s, and then I was still unbelievably broken because when I was pregnant, I shouldn't have had a child with this man from the get-go. I was alone throughout my pregnancy, and that just adds another layer of trauma. And then going through that in childbirth and experiencing raising a child on your own, it's traumatizing. And I was mean and I was bitter. And I went on vacation to Cuba and I met a man who made me feel like $1 million. He was everything I needed at that moment. And I married him 2 weeks after knowing him, which is not a smart decision.
No, but with your past and your trauma, I mean, I can see this. This is somebody who's treated you to a point where you're like, I don't think I've ever had this. I don't think I'm ever going to find it again. I'm keeping this.
Yeah. He was everything I needed in the moment. It was almost like it was too good to be true. So I came back from vacation in Cuba and I was married and moving to Fort McMurray, Alberta, and within a month.
So he was from Fort McMurray.
He was, yeah,
Okay.
Fort McMurray.
Which, for people that don't know, that's northern Alberta, where it gets even colder than we are now in the winter.
Oh, it was, I remember -50 when we were living there in the winter. Oh my gosh. It was so cold at night. The lights would shine straight up into the sky. It was like a beam of light. And then your tires on your car, when it was so cold, they would just go ka-clunk, ka-clunk, ka-clunk when I'm driving to work in the morning.
And it's down where they have where they build all the pipelines and stuff like that. And because my brother worked
The
for
oil
a
sands,
company there,
yeah.
yeah, the oil sands and stuff. Yes. So you moved to Fort McMurray, and what goes on from there?
I had two other children
Okay, with the same gentleman.
from my marriage. Yes.
So all three children are from the same father.
Yeah. No, my first one is from early 20s
Oh,
from
I
a
see. Okay,
separate
that's
one,
a
and
different
then the
part.
other two are from.
Okay, so you met Fort McMurray after you had your first child. Okay.
Yes. And then, so of course, I mean, we're both gracefully broken. We are both unhealed people. What I've learned is you attract what you are, not what you want. So he had his own issues. I was overwhelmed. I was in nursing school. I had my oldest boy. I just had another baby. I have so many priorities. I couldn't cope with between school and a toxic marriage. We didn't know how to communicate. We always butt heads. It wasn't a healthy marriage. Like I said, I've never had a healthy relationship. But he introduced me to cocaine, and being a mom and having all these priorities and in nursing school to stay up, I would do cocaine. And then we went through our issue. And the first time I tried to leave him, and I had relocated back to Ottawa with two of my boys. Of course, I was, when you told me something before, you could you can make me believe unicorns flew. I just wanted to believe everything that anybody said. I didn't have any, maybe I just wasn't aware, or I didn't want to believe that there was any wrongdoing that anybody could do. I wanted to believe that everybody was a good person and had good intentions. But I honestly thought that he wanted to do better and work on us. So we went on vacation, and I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter. And then we ended up trying to make our marriage work again. And again, nothing had ever changed because he didn't do the work and I didn't do the work. I just started adding more responsibilities, another child on top of my already full list of responsibilities. It was just absolute chaos.
Yeah.
And so I start to go back to school again to finish my nursing. And I I'm married to a man who's never home because he's working. He has his own addiction issues and whatever he's doing on the side. And I'm left home with three kids. I've got my oldest, and I've got who's in school full time. And then I've got my middle son who's in kindergarten. And then I've got a newborn baby. So, and I have no help whatsoever. And it was absolute chaos.
And you're out in Fort McMurray again by this time.
I was out in Fort McMurray again.
So it's not like you have family or friends there to help you out.
No, it wasn't. And I mean, my dad would fly out so much. I would call and he would be on the first flight to come out and help me with the kids. But there's only so much one person can do.
Definitely.
But it was just, the only way for me to stay up and to do everything was to do a bump of cocaine. And I was addicted. It was really bad and it was really, really dark.
And that's hard to get away from,
And
like I
then
told you earlier.
It's incredibly difficult. But then when I decided to leave my ex-husband again for the last and final time, he became really violent, and he went to jail for, I think it was close to 6 months, for what he had done to me. It was I I don't wish it on anybody. I couldn't sleep. I was so afraid for the safety of my children, and I had to give my son Austin to my parents temporarily because he was the only one that I was legally able to remove out of the situation, because my ex-husband wasn't legally the guardian of Austin, so he couldn't say, well, no, he can't go anywhere. So I temporarily gave him to my parents, and that is the hardest thing that any parent, any mom could ever have to do, and I still remember it. But it wasn't about me. It was about his safety and his well-being. And I stayed in Fort McMurray until I could safely get my other two out. And the violence escalated. The stalking, the harassment, the watching me, my every move, the following me, it was just, it was horrible. That's an understatement. I used to refer to him as Ted Bundy on steroids.
It doesn't paint a nice picture, that's for sure.
I mean, it just goes to show how broken I was to accept someone like this into my life in the first place.
But did anything ever happen after that then with him? Did he finally go away for
It's
good? Did he?
been So I was given permission to make an emergency relocation without his permission from Fort McMurray, Alberta to Ontario to my parents' house because it was safety and I needed to get out because I was not going down a good path. And it was obvious. It was, that was in, I think, 2018.
So just about 6 years ago.
Yeah. And then I relocated with my other two kids, and he hasn't been around since.
So when this whole violence was going on, were you two technically still married? Was he still living with you?
Yes, we were still married.
Okay.
It was, he didn't want to let go. He refused to let me go. It was as though I was a possession of his. I was his property. I wasn't his wife.
And
It was,
was it verbal abuse too? Because I know sometimes in this situation, we had a guest on a while back, Becca, who went through kind of the same thing where he was very narcissistic and basically he made her feel like you're never going to get better than me. You're nothing. You're
that's it.
this, and nobody's going to like you anyways, and things like that. Was it verbal abuse like that too?
It was mental, emotional, financial, physical. It was every kind of abuse. It was, he made me feel like I was nothing, and no one would ever want somebody like me, and he was my only option. And when you have so much abuse and somebody goes to such extent, you believe it. And when they put the fear of death in you, it's not easy to overcome.
No, and with the past that you had, you probably believed everything he said that I am nothing and nobody will. This is the best I'm going to get. I might as well stay in it. But it's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for your children to see this because then
No,
you don't want them to grow up with that in their brain and have them maybe carry it over too. Um, so you finally, now what happened when it came to like the officials, the police, anything like that? Did they start to get to know him and his tendencies? Did they believe you or?
everyone the police department, the fire department, everybody knew us. I mean, it was constant calling, and he was constantly arrested and breaching his probation, his conditions. And it was being sneaky and sly and calling me from unknown name, unknown numbers. And it got to the point where I had to buy myself a recorder because no one believed me. The amount of abuse that I went through in my marriage is I I don't understand why I am where I am today. There's no way with the mentality that I have. It's unexplainable.
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate you had to go through that, and I hear this all the time, and it it shows you how our judicial system has to change because there's no reason somebody in your situation who's going through something like this, on top of him being arrested over and over and breaching this and breaching that, and he's still able to come out and be able to do that. I mean, there's got to be a limit there where it's like, you know what, like he should be locked up.
Honestly, I gave up on calling the police. It got so bad where I'm calling the police. He's harassing me nonstop, and he's being so careful about it where nobody can do anything about it. I had a police officer say to me once, there's the law, his conditions, and he's dancing in and around it, so we can't touch him. He's good at it. It was premeditated. Everything that he did when it came to me was premeditated. He was is calculated to a T. It was like he sat there and he planned every little bit of it.
No, I'm
And
sorry that you had to go through all that.
when you think about it, when I go back and I go through it, how much energy did he put in to try to ruin my life and my kids' life to keep me? And it makes me think, what kind of childhood trauma did that man go through to make him who he is today? Because I know what I went through. It just makes you think. Everybody has their own story.
Yeah. And they say sometimes people like that, I shouldn't say people like that. That's not really the proper way to say it, but somebody who's acting out like that, they could have went through the same thing when they were younger too. Like you said, like you don't know what their whole background was, and it's unfortunate because I always had it in my mind that you would think that somebody who went through stuff like that themselves would think, I'm never going to let anybody. I know what it felt like. I'm not going to put that anybody else through that through me. But it's a I've never been there, so I can't speak. I'm just going as a layman here, and I'm very ignorant to it. I've never had to experience it, things like that. So I feel for people like you that are going through all that trauma. So you finally get away from there. You're able to get a reprieve to go back to Ontario with your children for emergency purposes. Does it start to get a little better then?
No, because I haven't healed. I'm still a walking time bomb. I am mad. I am angry. I have an addiction to cocaine, and I don't know how to deal with my emotions. I have so many things, so many unhealed traumas. It's there. My body feels it. My mind feels it. I'm depressed. I have kids. I have no one to help me, no one to give me the tools to heal. And I think for so long, I looked for someone else to do the work for me, someone else to everything on the outside of me to fix my problems. Whereas the only way to get better was to do the work on myself. I had the answer the whole time. Everything I needed was within me.
Yeah.
So I struggled with suicide, a few attempts, and my last suicide attempt was in 2019. I drank a bottle of vodka and I had planned to hang myself. I had everything down to a T. I knew exactly what I was doing. My kids were across the street at my parents'. I was just done. And the moment I don't know what came over me, all of a sudden I felt this warm presence and it turned me around and it walked me up my stairs and across my street into my parents' house. And I sat down at my parents' table and I said, I need help. Take me to the hospital right now. And my mom put me in the car and she took me to the Royal Ottawa. And that was the first day of the rest of my life.
That's when it all started to change.
And that was incredibly difficult for me to do.
It always is. That first step, it's that first thing of, I don't even think it's just the hardest of going there. It's the hardest of looking at somebody and saying, I need help. That's the hardest thing to say, I think.
It is. And it's that one initial step. The whole journey is difficult to healing. It's not easy to look at yourself in the mirror and to accept everything that you've done, the horrible things that you've done to people. But it's the only way is through it.
No, it's going to be a lifelong journey. It's never going to get, it's just like anybody who's got an alcoholic addiction, a drug addiction. It's always going to be there. It's just a matter of how you cope with it and deal with it and finding those tools that, like you said, that you can use to cope with it. And I don't think it's just, I think it's at the point now for some of the tools is, yeah, you can think of maybe some of the horrible things you might have done to others, but you also have to look at it in perspective of look at all the horrible things that were done to you. And it's just a matter of finding that balance to say, you know what, maybe some of the stuff I did was a reflection of what was happening to me or vice versa. Maybe I was doing stuff and I felt, because I know some people, they feel like, well, I was doing all this mean stuff. I deserved everything that was coming to me. And it's a matter of getting that out of your mentality and saying, no, nobody deserves that.
Nobody does deserve it. But what I understand is that hurt people hurt people. And I was incredibly broken. And when I was admitted to the Royal Ottawa, I was diagnosed with CPTSD from everything that I went through with my ex-husband. I remember I couldn't go to sleep because when I did go to sleep, I would have nightmares and of my ex-husband dumping gasoline over my head and my hair would burn and then I would wake up in a panic and I was always in fight mode. I remember when my kids would walk into the room, they needed to announce themselves like they were royalty because if they just popped up, I was afraid. I didn't know what my reaction was going to be.
Yeah.
So, and the moment that my kids realized that I was truly healed from PTSD was when we went to Saunders Farm Halloween and the chainsaw massacre guy was in my face with the chainsaw and I didn't do anything. I wasn't triggered. I was normal. I was smiling and happy and my kids were all like, Mom, wow, this is wow. And it took a lot of work for me to get there.
Yeah.
And that
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
it took a lot of work for me to get to that point.
Oh, for sure.
And I mean, any random person would walk up to my car and say even the smallest hurtful thing to me, I would just completely explode. And I remember the first time a woman walked up to me and said something, and okay, I'll pray for you. Have a nice day. It was just second nature for me. And my kids were, whoa, Mom, what happened to you?
Exactly. Well, they're used to like, it's only been like 5 years of recovery for you and you look at it, roughly, and but you're going through 30 plus years of trauma and abuse, and it's only been like maybe 4 or 5 years since then. I mean, and how far you've come. I mean, I had the pleasure of meeting you, what, about a month ago or something like that. You came to my
Yeah,
studio here and we talked, and just listening to you and your story and reading part of your book and that, and I go back to when you came and met with me and we talked and that, and then giving me a big hug when you left. It's not the same girl.
it's not. A completely different. I am a completely different person. Who I once was feels like another lifetime. Even my kids see it.
Yeah,
And when they recognize it and they tell me how proud of me they are, it just makes it so much worth it.
exactly.
And one thing that I learned from this healing journey is I find a lot of people say, and I used to say, well, I'm doing it for my kids. You can't do it for anyone but yourself.
Exactly. In order to
And
do it for
that's,
your kid, you have to do it for yourself first.
you have to.
Yeah.
You can't. And that's a form of self love.
I always put stuff when people talk about that. I always put in perspective when you go on to a flight to fly somewhere, and the stewardess, I still call them stewardess. I know I should flight attendant. Sorry, when the flight attendant stands at the front there and gives you the emergency protocols, and they talk about when the ventilators fall from the ceiling. The one thing you're supposed to do first is grab yours and put yours on first, and then secure it on the children. It's almost the same analogy. You got to make sure you're okay first before you can make sure that they're okay. And once you're okay, they will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's,
it's great to see you like this. Now, why don't we get now when it comes to before we get into anything, the ex, is he still out there? Is he like doing anything, or is he completely out of the
I
picture
have
now?
no idea. I haven't seen him, heard from him in years.
Okay.
And I know I've come a really long way when I can look at these people who have hurt me the most in my life and I have nothing but forgiveness for them. And I've learned that forgiveness is for me, not for them.
Because I can also hear it when you're
And
talking about your dad and stuff like that. Because with the trauma you had growing up at home with bullying and things like that, and I know that the home life wasn't the greatest for you, to be able to have your mom and dad helping you out with this, I think it's almost like you guys have a second chance at a great relationship with your family and stuff.
and that's really difficult for my parents to understand that because I wrote my book and I wrote the experiences that I have, this is my perspective of the things that I went through. I'm not the perfect person. I am the furthest thing from perfect. And I have my own issues still. I'm not a perfect parent. I have done horrible things with my kids. I've made horrible decisions, but it's accepting it and understanding that talking about these issues isn't blaming you or putting any fault on anything. It's recognizing that you're a human being. We all make mistakes. And hurt people. And the only way to move forward is accepting the past and moving forward together as a family.
Yeah. And like you said, you said it twice now, and I wrote it down because I thought it's very perverse in the way you say it is hurt people. And it's very true.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're one of those people right now that have been able to try and cut that tie. Because when hurt people, they continue hurting people because it's all they
They
know.
do.
You've been able to get the help in a way that you've been able to say, you know what, I don't want to hurt people anymore. I want to
I
be a
don't.
good person. And not that you weren't a good person before, but this is wrong wording, but you don't want to hurt anybody else, whether it be directly or indirectly. You just want to try to be the best person you can be. And you've sort of severed that tie. And if more people can find that, that would be amazing. And that's the problem. Some people don't have that help that you got, or have no way of getting that help, or don't know how to get that help.
And it's so hard to find the tools to heal and get that help, especially in such a small community. where you have to travel to get the resources that you need to heal from PTSD, especially.
Yeah. Which is funny because you think we would have a lot of, I know we have one place here called the Robbie Dean Center that tries to help as much as they can, but a lot of it's volunteers too in that. But you would think they would have more of a support system right here in our neighborhood, only because right here, like just down the road here in Petawawa, is one of the biggest naval bases in Canada, or army bases in Canada, not Navy, but military bases here in Canada. And how many military people go through PTSD from everything that they've seen and had to witness. You would think there would be more here, and you wouldn't have to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to Ottawa or somewhere, or thing. You think there would be a little bit more.
But from my experience with PTSD, I was, from my research, the only proven cure or anything that could help with PTSD was EMDR. So when I was in the Royal Ottawa, one of the nurses told me to read The Body Keeps Score by Bessel A. Vanderkolk, I think it was. And I took that book and the content and I ran with it. And I started making phone calls about EMDR, eye movement desensitizing reprocessing. But there's only so many people in the area that are qualified to administer EMDR. So then I got creative and I found an online virtual EMDR, and it was too expensive. It was for a single mom who's going through everything I was going through. It was over $100 American a month. So then I did my own research and I went through the steps of bringing up the past experiences, every individual situation that traumatized me. And I went on YouTube and I found bilateral stimulation audio, and I basically healed myself.
No, you did the work. You did the homework yourself. You healed yourself. And not only are you better for it, but your kids are better for it now because
They are.
they've got a beautiful relationship with their mom. I can see that. And they got grandma and grandpa there with them. And I'm glad to see things like so. Tell us a little bit more about Samantha now.
I am the best version of me that I've ever been. And having been diagnosed with CPTSD and living with it and understanding how traumatizing it is for not only yourself, but for your family members to live with somebody with PTSD is horrific. And so PTSD has become one of my passions. And it's just everything that I've gone through to be the woman that I am today. I still don't know why I have been able to come out the other side. I've known so many people that have gone through not even half of the traumatizing experiences that I've gone through, and they didn't make it, or they're still on the street, they're a crackhead, or they're homeless. Why me? So
You just got to be
sharing
grateful
my
for what you have.
I am grateful. So sharing my story, if it can encourage even one person to keep going, it was worth it.
No, definitely. And have you gotten into doing any speaking engagements, things like that in any places or to try and tell your story to help out? Or is this something
This is the first for me.
oh, I'm honored. I did not know that. No, I'm honored. And now you did write your book. I've been talking about it throughout the thing, and I want to show it to everybody. My Story, His Glory by Samantha Buttle. Go out. I got this on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon, probably some other places too. You can even get a ebook version. Um, tell us more about what it did for you with the PTSD and everything. Was this kind of a relief getting it all out on paper? Did it help you try and cope with a lot of stuff? Did it help you, or did it bring more to the surface, or was it just more of I want to get my story out there to help other people, or was it a kind of a mixture of everything?
For going through the healing process, I find when I write things out, it organizes my thoughts. Whereas if you just keep it in your head, it feels like it's a lot bigger than it actually
It's a big
is.
weight.
It's a huge weight off your shoulders. And then, like I said, I can't explain as to why I went through all that I went through, and I am on the other side of it. So I had to share my story. There's no way I could go through all of that to be here
Yeah.
to just keep it to myself. I can't.
No. I think it's great because it's a story like most of the people that come on my show, that all the stuff that you guys went through, and look at you now. You're doing well, you're healthy, you're happy. And if you can go through everything you went through over 30 years and come out the other side and say, you know what, you can make it through it. You just got to believe in yourself and love yourself, and that will help you hopefully take the steps necessary to get there. Um, to me, it shows people that there is hope. You just got to get out there and do it. That you're not stuck, and you're not the only
It's
one that's ever went through it.
one day at a time. Healing, it's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It's baby steps, one day at a time, one foot in front of the other. And it's not good all the time. It's up and down. And I still have good days and I have bad days. The only difference is I have the ability to regulate my emotions, and I'm self aware where I know my limits, my boundaries, and I love myself, which is something that I've never been able to do.
No, that's awesome. And I always say nobody else is going to love you if you don't love yourself, because they're going to pick up off of that. And now, do you have
I
a good
do.
support system behind you right now? Do you still go to any of these things with ROM and stuff like that?
I have a few life coaches right now that I work with on a weekly basis. And I have a really good support system with the community church, Whitewater Westland Community Church, who have been absolutely wonderful for my children and I. And like I touched on earlier, where I've never been able to have more than one friendship, I've taught myself how to have an abundance of friendships and relationships with different women and people from across the nation who have been absolutely wonderful in supporting me on this journey.
That's awesome. Because I always say, no matter how much help you get and how much you start to feel better, you still need that support system, because there's going to be times where you need to rely on somebody to help you through a downtime so that you don't go back to the old ways type of thing. So I'm glad you have
And
that support system.
I find even recently when I've just lost my Great Dane on Sunday.
Sorry to hear that.
Before, when something traumatizing as that would have happened, I would have spiraled back. I would have turned to alcohol to grieve and go through, process the pain, to numb the pain. And just knowing that that didn't even occur to me to go to the liquor store or use some form of other method to numb my pain, I was okay with it. And I sat with the grief. And that's progress. That's beautiful to be at a point of my life where I'm okay with the pain and I have the tools to deal with it in a healthy way.
Just think of the happy times you had with the Great Dane. So,
Oh, beautiful. Lots of slobber.
well, I bet you, was it a male, female?
It was a boy.
Boy, yeah. So I bet you he gave you a lot of support too. Like a lot of times that was your support, and where you just needed somebody, just sit down with him and just let him love you.
He brought me through my worst moments.
Good for him. He was here for a
He
purpose.
he was here for a purpose, and he was almost my personal support dog when I was going through PTSD, because I remember when I was triggered at my worst times with PTSD, my body would shut down. And he would come over with his big slobbery gob and just put it right on my face until I was grounded. And then he would sit on me and I was able to move forward.
Good for you. I'm glad. I always like to end the show with words of wisdom from my guest. So before we leave today, do you have any words of wisdom that you'd like to send out to anybody there?
We're not afraid of the dark. We're only afraid of what we think is in the dark.
Very good. I love it. And for any of you that would like to pick up Samantha's book, again, you can get it on Amazon. My Story, His Glory. And I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I've started it. I'm a couple chapters in, and it is a book that you're going to love. And I think there's a lot more stuff in here that we couldn't cover in just an hour here. So to hear more of her story and how she went through a lot of that stuff and how she's gotten out of it, make sure you go and buy her book because it's going to be really worth it. I've already read, like I said, the first 3 or 4 chapters, and it's worth it already. I'm going to finish it this week probably. And thank you, Samantha, for coming on here and being vulnerable to us and telling us your story. I know this, like you said, this is your first time letting it out to the public, other than your book, of course. So hopefully, it was a little painless for you. It wasn't so bad.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share my story and hopefully give hope for somebody to just keep going one more day, that one more step.
Exactly. No, I'm thankful for you coming on here. And for anybody out there, don't forget to subscribe and tell all your friends about this channel because we get so many people like Samantha come on here, and we just want to try and help anybody out there to get through what they're going through. And until the next time, I hope everybody has a great week, great month. And remember, if anybody asks, say the Butler did it.